Now, the compound of Bab alAzizia in the Libyan capital of Tripoli was once the beating heart of the Gaddafi regime. From his private residence within the grounds, Libya's despotic leader controlled his country with such ferocity that residents living nearby the compound would look away as they passed by, so as not to catch the eye of the security guards. As the Gaddafi regime fell in the autumn of 2011, Bab alAzizia was badly bombed. It's now home to a few squatters, plus a significant amount of Tripoli's municipal waste. But the Libyan authorities have decided to do what only really could be done to such a place of private authority. They're turning it into a public park. All to tell me more, we're joined on the line by the regular Monocle contributor, the journalist Nabila Ramdani. Welcome back to the programme, Nabila. How great a place was Bab alAzizia? Describe it to us in terms of what was there and also the influence it had over the people.
Well, it was a very significant place indeed. It was essentially a fortress, a huge fortress, a very secure compounds, which included a complex network of tunnels underground, which would allow the Libyan leader to escape. There were also an awful lot of jails, in fact, underneath the compound. It was very much, a bunker, effectively, a secure bunker from where the Libyan leader ruled and imposed its rule for more than 4 decades. And it was a symbol also of Gaddafi's tight, hold and control over the country. So it was a very significant symbol as well, and a fortress that people indeed feared very much.
And what state is it in now? It was bombed from the air during the Gaddafi's overthrowing, but has been almost left to rot.
Yes, and it has to be highlighted that it was actually the first target of French jets and RAF jets, which in that respect raised questions as to the motivations behind the NATO intervention, which, it was very much criticized for intervening not so much to protect civilian lives, but in effect to bring about regime change. And the compound was where the very first bombs, NATO bombs, were dropped. So clearly the target was Gaddafi from day one, and it was bombed heavily. There was also an instance very early on in the military intervention where civilians were killed in the surroundings of the compound. It's in a bad state, but it's still there, and it's still a very, imposing structure. And clearly the authorities decided that they wanted to get rid of it.
They want to get rid of it, but there has been considerable debate over its fate, hasn't there? Last year it was supposed to be turned into something. Now it's going to be a park.
I think what the authorities are in effect trying to do is to erase the memory of Gaddafi, and it's not so much about turning it into a tourist attraction, but about the destruction of a complex which has been associated with Gaddafi for more than 40 years, and its replacements with a park. And there are numerous historical precedents with this type of things. If you try to go and see Adolf Hitler's infamous bunker complex in Berlin, for example, then you see it's being concreted all over, and in spite of being of it being the place of Hitler's death, and indeed the place where he spent his last days, the idea is to get rid of the legacy of a tyrant, and the reality is that geographical areas associated with tyrants, or indeed any kind of criminal, pose a very difficult problem. And this public park is a very sensitive one. It means that nobody has to live there, and it will look completely different to the fortress which Gaddafi created.
Let's examine the situation in Libya as a result. The change in Bab alAzizia is obviously the end product of a large amount of dispute and negotiation. This is reflected in the whole way that Libya is trying to emerge at the moment as a democracy. They're currently embroiled in an argument about who is going to write the constitution. At what stage is Libya now in its recovery?
Well, absolutely, and I think this whole symbol of turning Gaddafi's fortress into, a public park it unfortunately, the peace and stability which public parks essentially represent has by no means been established in the new Libya. And it is still an extremely dangerous place with weapons everywhere, and indeed fears that democracy is not on course. And Libya is highly unlikely to attract tourists of any sort, while the country is still so volatile and indeed dangerous, with Western dignitaries often targeted by very radical elements. The American ambassador to Libya was, of course, murdered in the wake of the liberation of the country, if I may put it that way. And its Western representatives are often targeted. The French embassy has been targeted many times. The British, embassy and indeed the consulate have also been targeted an awful lot of times. Indeed, in fact, British expats have been evacuated on a number of times by the government, and the population, the Libyan civilians at large, are not particularly safe because of this huge amount of weapons circulating, and dare I say, the lack of law and order. There's no central government with a police force that has been able to disarm effectively the country so far.
Nabila Ramdani, thank you very much as ever for joining us on The Globalist.